Today we're talking about something that is a little challenging, and I understand that. And that's this idea of tithing. Tithing. Now maybe that's something familiar to you. That's really giving. It's giving a tenth. The tithe means a tenth. Maybe that's something that you've grown up doing. You remember your parents did that, or your grandparents. You know that churches ask for a tithe or an offering, that they pass this offering bucket around. Again, this could be something familiar to you or not. I don't necessarily know what your upbringing was, what your story was, but I do know that the idea of giving to the church, the idea of tithing especially, has so many bad connotations associated with it. So many times that TV preachers and evangelists have maybe taken advantage of people and pretended to be able to heal them or sell them something that was going to be miraculous in their life, and you got to send in $1,000. Or maybe you feel like you've gone to church before and it feels like they're always talking about money. And they just want to get your money, and that's how you feel. Whether that's what they intended or not, it's how you feel. And so this idea of money, of tithing, of giving to the church, man, it has so many negative thoughts and so many negative ideas attached to it. And so I approach this subject humbly, but I just want to shed some light on it as I've learned over the years. I'm 35 years old right now. I've been married for 10 years. I have 4 kids. I've been in ministry for about the last 14 years. And tithing has been one of those journeys where I've seen God provide, not only for me, not only for our family, because he certainly has, but I've been able to see as other families of other couples have begun tithing, have begun giving, to see the blessing that comes from that, to see the way that God steps in to provide. You see, the tithe is mentioned in the Old Testament. It's carried over and referenced again in the New Testament. It actually comes to a head in this moment in Malachi. So Malachi is the very last book in the Old Testament, right before you have this break before you get to the book of Matthew in the New Testament. And God has told his people, he says, you are robbing me. And everyone is like, God, what are you talking about? Who's robbing you? We're not robbing you. No way. We would never do that. And he says, you are robbing me by not giving me the tithe. You are withholding your tithes, and because of that, you are actually robbing me. And then this is the one place that we see in Scripture where God says, test me in this, that if you don't begin to tithe, that I will pour out from heaven more blessing than you can even imagine, than you can handle. He says, test me in this. And so whenever God gives us instructions like that, whenever God speaks so clearly, we want to pay attention. We want to understand what that's all about. You see, God throughout the Old Testament had been cultivating a relationship with his people, teaching his people what he is like. They got some stuff right, some stuff wrong along the way, like we all do still. But he had their people, and they wanted them to be set apart. You see, God was holy, which holy means set apart. And he wanted his people to be holy, which again, set apart, different than the rest of the world. And so the rest of the world, every other kingdom, every other nation, every other people had this obsession to work hard and to earn money, to gain for themselves up riches that they might keep for themselves. And what happens when we do that, we don't realize it, but money and finances can become an idol. It's called idolatry whenever we take something and we elevate that thing above God. Now, we may not think of it as idolatry in that sense. Maybe we think of idols as the golden calves and the big statues and things like that, and those are certainly more literal idols, but idolatry is when we take something and we raise it above God. And God had seen in the history of the world over and over and over again, so many bad things happen because of this love of money where people idolized it and they would do anything to have more and more and more of it. And so God says, I want my people to be different. I want my people to stand apart. I'm going to institute what's called the tithe. And they're going to bring to me the first 10% of everything that they have. The first tenth. That's what tithe means. And in doing so, he breaks this idolization of money because the people are then forced to trust God. Lord, here's my tenth. Here's my 10%. I'm going to give that to you. Now, God, it's not making sense in my checkbook, in my budget. I really would like to have that 10th back. I really would like to keep that, right? We all still feel that. I still feel that. Perhaps you still feel that. Tithing is this step of faith. Tithing is saying, Lord, I'm going to trust that you're going to provide because I know that only you can provide. Lord, I'm going to trust that you can do more with this 90% than I can do with the whole 100%. You see, tithing is this idea of trust, and it's this idea of obedience. God says, trust me in this, that when you tithe, I won't pour out all the blessing that you can handle. And so we don't tithe to receive, but we do tithe because God asked us to, he told us to, and we tithe because we're going to trust that he's going to provide for us. Instead of thinking that we can do it on our own and idolizing money, we're going to take this 10% of our money that we could spend on other things, and we're going to trust it to God. So this idea of tithing breaks that struggle, that curse, that problem that societies around the world have faced forever in idolizing money, in raising money up above, because in fact, we're not going to idolize that. We're not going to trust that. We're going to give that to God. We're going to entrust that God will provide. And so nowadays, fast forward to the church now, the reason that we tithe into the church, number one, God asked us to do that. God said that, hey, I'm going to actually provide for my church that they might be able to carry out the ministry into the community, love their neighbors well, all those kind of things with the finances that the church brings together to help provide. And so sometimes, let me speak to this, we have issues in our own heart about tithing because we lack trust, not necessarily in God, but we lack trust in the church itself, in the pastor perhaps, or the staff. We've seen people abuse it. We think the pastor has a car that's a little too nice. His house is a little too big. The staff gets paid too much money. Hey, I think that we should have spent that money on the youth program instead of on the kids. Or we should have bought new chairs because we have old chairs. Or we should have done this or that. And we end up deciding if we're going to give, not based upon obedience from God, but on preference of our own desires. And when those don't match up with what we want, we say, well, I'm just going to withhold it. I'm not going to give anymore. And I think in the same way, it's just like when we find someone on the side of the road or sitting at a gas station that has no money and they're begging for a few dollars, and we say, you know what, I'm not going to give it to you because I don't trust where you're going to spend it. I think that scenario is just the same as what happens too many times in churches, and it honestly is more of a reveal of the condition of our own heart than it is of their heart. See, God tells us to tithe. God tells us to obey and to trust him in giving. And the rest is going to be up to him. If I'm withholding my tithe because I don't think it's being spent the way it should be spent, then I have a trust issue with the church. I have a trust issue with that, and I need to address that. But that doesn't make up for the fact that God asked me to tithe. And I know that there's tension here, and there's wrestling with this, and it's okay to walk into that. And in fact, I want to be willing to sit as a pastor and listen to what you have to say, to hear questions that you might have or struggles or challenges about giving, about tithing. You see, I'm gonna be the pastor here at Meadows Church right here in this community in Castle Rock. And I want the people that come to our church to trust where that money is going, to trust how it's being spent, and all those kind of things. But I want most of all for our people to see the blessing that comes from tithing because they're obeying and trusting God. And so as a pastor, I want to be able to hear and listen from you. I want to understand and help walk alongside you in this issue that I know is challenging. But when we tithe, we obey God and we trust God. And in fact, we fulfill his purposes of carrying out ministry through the church into the world. So wherever you are today, I pray that you would take that step, take that bold step into giving, into generosity, into tithing, and say, God, I'm giving this to you. I'm trusting you to provide. I believe you will do it. And I believe you'll see amazing things happen in your life from what God does. And I don't know what those will be, but I believe they'll come. So hey, again, if you have any questions, I'd love to hear from you. Please reach out. Happy to talk with you whenever. Our website is meadowschurch.com. You can check us out on Facebook, Instagram, leave a comment below, send a message, all those things. And hey, I'll talk to you soon. Have a wonderful week.